Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Today's video is going to be college football related. If you've been following the channel from the very beginning or close to the very beginning, you know I've did some over-unders on my predictions for some ACC teams and some SEC teams heading into the 2021 season. So if you have not watched those videos, please go back and watch them. But I've also did a video where I predicted who will win each division of the Power 5 conferences in college football this year. And I've also did a video on why I'm struggling to pick a winner in the Clemson-Georgia game. And I also did a video where I gave a few key things that I think need to happen for Clemson and for Georgia as we head into their game coming up on September the 4th, which is just a little over 2 months away. And I want to go ahead and say this now, that coming up sometime in the month of July, I'm going to go ahead and break down the Clemson-Georgia game. And I will tell you in that video who I think is going to win that game. So that will be coming up sometime in the month of July. But I quit giving out over-unders because I felt like I gave out the majority of the over-unders on the teams that anybody cares to talk about. And I said I wouldn't give any more unless I was asked by somebody to do a certain team. And I believe it was this past Thursday, me and my man Mike were discussing the Iowa Hawkeyes, because I remember him commenting on the YouTube page a few weeks back that he's always kind of been a fan of Iowa. And I have said before that I try to read every single comment. I may not always respond, but I try to, but I do at least read all the comments. And I asked him what he thought their record was going to be this year. So I figured, since him and I were talking about it, and I'm always saying that I try my best to do what anybody wants to talk about and talk about what you guys want to talk about, I asked him what their record was going to be, and he said 8-4. So I told him I would do a video and give my prediction on the 2021 Iowa Hawkeyes football season. If you have not yet watched my video where I made my predictions on who's going to win each division in the Power 5 conferences this year, please go back and watch that video. But if you have watched it, then you'll know that I picked Iowa to win their half of the Big Ten, but I did not give out what I thought would be their overall record. But I thought, since Mike said 8-4, I'd go ahead and give you my prediction on who I think they'll lose to and who I think they'll beat and what their overall record will be. They open up on September the 4th at 3:30 against the Indiana Hoosiers, so they'll open up in Big Ten play, and then they'll play 3 straight non-conference games against the Iowa State Cyclones, the Kent State Golden Eagles, and the Colorado State Rams. So after they open up with Big Ten play, they play all 3 of their non-conference games back-to-back. Now, if you follow college football, then you know that the ACC and the SEC are the only 2 Power 5 conferences that play 8 conference games and 4 non-conference games. The Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 play 9 conference games and 3 non-conference games. So Iowa will play Iowa State, Kent State, and Colorado State back-to-back. I do think they'll lose to Iowa State. That's usually a good game almost every single year, but it used to be Iowa won almost every single year. But Iowa State is pretty much a top 10 team now, and I think they've got too much offense. I do think Iowa State will beat Iowa. Now, last year, if you recall, Iowa State came out of the gate in the preseason as a top 10 team. But then opening weekend, they lost to Louisiana. And if I remember correctly, Louisiana had 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns. So I believe Louisiana's special teams outscored Iowa State's offense. But then after Iowa State lost to Louisiana, they were great the rest of the year, and they did end up in the top 10 by the time the season was over with. And they're preseason top 10 again this year in most of the polls, and they will be a top 10 team. And if you follow Iowa, you know they're one of the few teams that still runs the old school style of offense. Almost every single drive, they're either pro style or I formation, which is something you just don't see a whole lot of anymore. Iowa and their Big Ten counterpart, Wisconsin, are pretty much the only two teams that run the pro style of the I formation almost all game, every game. And that's why when Iowa and Wisconsin play, it usually ends up being 17-14, 20-17, 20-14, or somewhere along those lines. Now, Iowa's got a quarterback named Spencer Petras, or some say Petrus, that was a freshman last year, going to be a sophomore this year. He was good last year, but he wasn't great. But I think we'll see some improvement out of him this year. And if you follow recruiting, I don't follow it, all day and night, but I do follow it to a certain extent. And if you ever look up Iowa, it's very rare that you ever see Iowa finish in the top 40 in recruiting. They hardly ever have a 4-star or 5-star. If they do, it's usually an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. But most of the time, their skill position players are 2- and 3-star players. And that's why I've always been a big fan of Kirk Ferentz, because he'll get 2- and 3-star players, and then by the time those guys are seniors, they're first-round NFL draft picks. You can look at NFL right now and think of at least 10 players from Iowa in the NFL, and almost every one of them, if not every one of them, was a 2- or 3-star coming out of high school. Just like the Broncos tight end, Noah Fant, he came from Iowa. He was not heavily recruited. Detroit Lions tight end, T.J. Hawkinson, he come from Iowa. He was not heavily recruited. The 49ers tight end, George Kittle, he came from Iowa, and I think he might have been a 3-star, but he was great by the time he became a senior. So Kirk Ferentz always does more with less, which is why I've always liked him. If he could somehow become a better recruiter and get some 4- and 5-star players, Iowa would be a top 10 team year in, year out. And their running back, Tyler Goodson, is also from Sewanee, Georgia. He wound up all the way in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But I do think Iowa loses to Iowa State, but then after Colorado State, they wrap up the season with 8 straight conference games. They'll play Maryland the week after Colorado State, and then Penn State, and then Purdue, and then their bye week. So they'll have 7 games, then the bye week, and then 5 games. And immediately following the bye week will be Wisconsin, and I think the winner of that game will win their half of the Big Ten, which is why I've got Iowa winning their half of the Big Ten, because I think Iowa beats Wisconsin. But I think they lose to Penn State, and I think they lose to Minnesota a couple of weeks after they play Wisconsin. And, of course, they'll wrap up the season, like always, Thanksgiving weekend against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So I've got Iowa losing to Iowa State, Penn State, and Minnesota. So if I'm right, they'll be 7-2 overall in the Big Ten, 9-3 overall, because they'll be 2-1 non-conference with the non-conference loss to Iowa State. So what say you? Do you have any thoughts or comments on Iowa? Does 9-3 sound right, or do you have them going a little bit better or a little bit worse? And you agree with Mike. Mike said he thinks they'll go 8-4. Go ahead and give me your comments. I always like to read your comments on the comment page. And before we get out of here for the day, go ahead and give you our dad joke of the day. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.